Am I the asshole for making my germaphobe husband change our baby's diaper? My husband and I have a 2-month-old together. He does everything almost except changing diapers. He's a hardcore germaphobe, so I handle the dirty part of our son's care. So my husband's been pestering me about the faces I make when changing our son's diapers, telling me to smile all the time. I told him to leave me alone, and it's easy for him to say but he's also a parent. What type of parent never changes their baby's diaper? I handed him the stuff and asked him to enjoy it while I kept standing to watch how he would do it. It took him forever. As I expected, I made all types of disgusted, gross-out faces, and for a minute I thought he was going to throw up. When he was finished, I told him he lost the smiling contest with those faces he made. He was pissed and rushed to wash his hands, complaining about how I'm trying to get him to do everything and that I ruined his appetite by having him experience that. I replied and said he hasn't seen anything yet, and asked, since he wants us to have 4 kids, how he will be handling the other 3. He said he changed his mind and only wants 2. But still, my point stands. He tried to argue that I'm not taking his germophobia seriously, and what I forced him to do wasn't cool. He's been upset since then and has given me the silent treatment. So, am I the asshole?
Tell me why this man is trying to buy my underwear for $400. Story time. So I'm just sitting here on my bed, chilling, kind of bored, and I wanted to spice up my life a little bit, but I didn't want to get out of bed. And what better way to do that than to go on your requested messages on Instagram? So that's what I did. I was replying to some of y'all. I was reading all my crazy messages. Some of it was a little weird, but funny. Then I stumbled upon this message that said, I have a business offer that you just can't pass up. And you know me, I love the coin, so I opened that shit up. So I replied back and I was like, so what's this business offer? This man really replied with, I'll send you $200 for a pair of your underwear. I read that message and said, the fuck? There ain't no way this is real. So I started fucking around with him and I was like, sir, I'm a pricey girl. Why you lowballing me? He replied back within like 2 minutes and he was like, I'll up the price for $400, but you better send the underwear. So I sent him my Venmo, not thinking that it was real. But bitch, he really done sent $200. He said, I'll send the rest once I get the underwear. I'm good, love. I ain't said a shit.
Am I the asshole for not watching my brother-in-law's kids in an emergency? My husband and I have been together for more than a decade. We met in high school, childhood sweethearts. We used to have a good relationship with his older brother and sister-in-law until I refused to have their kids over anymore without their supervision. What happened was 2 years ago, I was taking them once or twice a week after school or an occasional day on the weekend to spend time with their cousin. It was good because they would have our kids occasionally too, but over time, brother-in-law's kids got harder and harder to have in our home. They became very demanding, very rude, rebellious, and wouldn't listen to anything I said. And my husband's brother and his wife ignored me. Worse, we had the then 9-year-old yell fuck off to my face in McDonald's because they didn't have a burger he wanted on the menu there, and he was pissed. Another worse was the kids taking my debit card to order pizza when they were spending the night at our house. My husband caught them just in time. Single thing, my brother-in-law and his wife dismissed our concerns, so I put a stop to it. A few days ago, my brother-in-law's wife had a medical emergency. He called and asked if I would take his kids. I said no. Honestly, I couldn't do it again. My husband's parents think I was wrong to say no too. So am I the asshole?
This is why you should be careful who you befriend. When I was in junior high, I was a friendly and curious person. 1 month into the fall semester, we got a new transfer student. He was seated behind me and his name was Joe. I introduced myself to him, trying to ease attention. I showed him what we learned so far and helped him to look over his class schedule. We had 2 classes and lunch together. Naturally, we got to know each other and became friends. He was a quiet kid but talked a lot around me, so I assumed he was just comfortable with me. I made it clear to him that we were just friends and he agreed, so I brought him around my friends and we all started to hang out. Fast forward to spring break, I told Joe that I was going out of town with my family. He seemed disappointed we couldn't spend spring break together but understood. However, while on spring break, I ran into Joe at a restaurant. I didn't tell him where I was going, so I thought to myself, wow, what a coincidence. He said he was visiting family in the same town and I believed him. Then in senior year, Joe and I were hanging out at least 3 times a week. I noticed it was too much and I wanted to make time for my other friends as well. That's when things started to change. I ran into Joe, or should I say saw him in the corner of my eye when I spent time with someone else over myself. He started to become obsessive and clingy. The first few times I didn't think much of it. However, it all became clear when I questioned him and he said that he accidentally followed me. Once I questioned Joe, he confessed, saying that it was because he wanted to make sure I was safe. I felt betrayed and creeped out. He apologized and asked for forgiveness. I told him I didn't want to be friends with him anymore. That's when he got angry and left. The next 2 to 3 days, he didn't come to school. My friends told me that he harassed him for snitching on him. When he came back to school, we pretended like we didn't know each other. On my walk home that day, I heard Joe calling my name in a low and unfamiliar tone, but he was nowhere to be seen. I don't know why, but my gut told me to run as fast as I could. I listened to it and sprinted all the way home. I made sure every door and window was locked. I was convinced that I was being paranoid at this point. Then my phone screen lit up. I looked to see many missed calls from Joe. Then I heard my name being called again. I looked up to see Joe in the front of my house, banging on the door. Everything went completely silent after 5 minutes, which felt like an eternity. The last words I heard from him was, "You'll always be my best friend." This issue was brought up to the school and Joe never showed up again. 4 years have passed since then, and just a few days ago, I got a couple friend requests on my social media accounts. It was him. I blocked him and changed all my social media names into something else. I don't live in that same town anymore, or even the same country. However, I can't help but to feel like the scared 18-year-old me again. I'm not the friendly person I once was, and I've become cautious around other people.
This is why you should always breathe through your nose. In 2009, a Russian man named Artyom Sidorkin started experiencing intense chest pains to the point where he couldn't even stand up. He tried to ignore it, but when he started coughing up blood, he went to the emergency room. They gave him an x-ray, and it revealed a fist-sized tumor growing in his lung. Afterwards, the doctor told Mr. Sidorkin, unfortunately, it looks like cancer. But before they could start removing large chunks of his lung, the doctor needed to do a biopsy to see if it really was cancer. So, a terrified Mr. Sidorkin came in a few days later, they performed the biopsy, and the surgeon, as he was looking at the tissue, noticed something. Tucked in the middle of the tissue was a 5-centimeter long fir tree. Mr. Sidorkin was a botanist, and he was a big mouth breather, and at some point while he was working, he managed to inhale a fir tree seed. The doctors told him he didn't have cancer, he had a tree. He was shocked, and he said, I had no sense that a tree was growing in my lungs. But more than shocked, he was just happy to be cancer-free. This is why you should never eat a cult's applesauce. During his stay in a psych ward in the 1970s, Marshall Applewhite formed an intense, non-romantic relationship with his nurse, Bonnie Nettles. They quickly realized aliens had preordained their encounter, and now they needed to board their spacecraft once the aliens came back to Earth to give them the signal. The pair formed a cult called Heaven's Gate, and they recruited people by telling them if they missed this one UFO ride, they would be destroyed when the Earth was inevitably recycled. Their cult was considered a joke and not a threat until they did something so horrific it shocked the world. On March 26, 1997, the aliens were going to be passing overhead, hiding behind a comet, and it was now time for the members to hop on board. Over the course of 3 days, members donned matching Nike sneakers, ate poisoned applesauce, tied bags over their head, and then waited to exit the Earth. Right before they died, they conducted exit interviews, and they are truly disturbing. To see these interviews and learn more about the cult of cults, check out Heaven's Gate on HBO Max, link is in my bio. This is why you should never step foot on the faraway dock. In 1994, an 11-year-old named Mark arrived at summer camp and made his way over to the dining hall where the director was going to talk about the next couple of weeks. The director emphasized that no one was allowed to swim out to the dock located way out in the middle of the lake, although she didn't say why. Mark and the 3 other boys in his cabin were so intrigued by this faraway dock that the next day during lunch, while everyone was eating, they hopped in the lake and started swimming out. When they finally got out to the dock, they were a little bit let down because it looked like any other dock. But they decide to make the best of it, they climb on top and they start playing the game where they all stand on one side until it floods, last one to fall off wins. As the corner sank, they started to hear a scratching sound coming from underneath the dock. Suddenly, hundreds of these big meaty spiders come crawling out through the breaks in the wood and slide down the slanted dock towards the boys who panic and fall forward, and there's spiders swarming their hair and their face. Turns out the dock was off limits because it was overrun with dock spiders, and the boys flooded their nest. This is why you should never spend the night on Niku Island. In 1937, while on her flight around the world, Amelia Earhart mysteriously vanished over Howland Island in the Pacific Ocean. Despite an enormous search, she was never found. 3 years after her disappearance, a scientist discovered an incomplete skeleton on this tiny, uninhabited island called Niku Island that wasn't too far from Howland Island. It looked like whoever's bones these were, they had been ripped limb from limb. But when the bones were examined, they determined they were not Amelia Earhart's. But in 2017, a forensic anthropologist re-examined the bones and determined they were almost definitely Amelia's. So scientists went to Niku Island and they found freckle cream, something Amelia was famous for using. So the working theory is she crash landed on Niku Island and she fell asleep somewhere on the beach. Then, after smelling her blood, hundreds of 3-foot-wide coconut crabs came out of their burrows, swarmed her, and ate her.
Someone thought they were actually going to shame me about something, about a choice. I don't have any shame. And there's multiple reasons, but there's a main reason. My right ear, I don't hear as well out of it as I do my left ear. And that's because in high school, there was a circumstance which ended up with another gal's thighs against my head. And through the same circumstances, they were kind of wet. They had moisture on them. But also in that circumstance, something took place that caused a very rapid squeezing and a moving, and it actually damaged my eardrum on that side. The song she was playing was Fight for All the Wrong Reasons by Nickelback. So I have no shame, because the last thing that I heard on this earth with perfect clarity was a fucking Nickelback song. So I'll be damned if you try to say something to me about being an accountant.
So you know when you're doing your business with your girlfriend and you clean up? One time I forgot to and it ended up horribly. So me and my girlfriend were going to see a movie one night and when we got there the ads were still playing. So she decided that she wanted to go to the bathroom and yeah. And I'm an adrenaline junkie for that kind of stuff in public so I couldn't turn it down. But in the bathroom we could still hear the echo from the movie. And once we got finished we had noticed that it already started. We were in such a rush that her and I both forgot to clean up. So we get into the movie theater and it is absolutely packed. And it took me a couple of minutes to find a seat. A singular seat left, meaning she had to sit on my lap. And everything was pretty normal throughout the movie until it was over. They turned on the lights as the movie was ending and we decided to leave. Well, my girl was wearing a skirt. I looked down at my pants as I got up to leave and I noticed that there was stuff all over me. And I knew what it was. And when I look up, everyone is looking at me and laughing. And as me and my girl are leaving the theater, a group of girls and guys come up to us. And what they did embarrassed me for life. Like and follow for part 2. Part 2 is up right now. Just click the link in my bio and download the app. Then search up my name and it's the first thing that pops up. The story title is Movies Part 2. But it's a different title in the actual video. Anyway, I post all my part 2s early on that app because I honestly just like it better. As well as stories that I don't post on here and other exclusive content. It's a social networking app where you can talk to other people and watch streamers while you're there. It's super cool. But if you don't feel like doing that, don't worry, part 2 will be up on TikTok tomorrow. Thanks you guys, I love you and I hope you have a great day.